While the world seemingly inches closer to collapse every single day, the 20s have done at least one thing right. For 3 straight years, we've had some terrific new music to listen to as it all goes to hell. There were plenty of awesome albums that came out in 2022, so put on your noise-canceling headphones and get ready to hit like on your streaming service, because the great pop culture debate panelists are going to tell you about our picks for the best music of 2022. Oh shit, my alarm's going off. That means it's bad bitch o'clock, it's thick 30, and it's about damn time I start this show. I'm your host, Eric Rezsnyak. Please help me welcome my amazing panel. If having wet legs is wrong, then she doesn't want to be dry. It's Andrea Guerrero.
Eric, just so you know, I will be recording the entirety of this podcast from my Shea Lounge.
And would you like us to assign someone to butter your muffin?
It'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
It's so filthy. I love it. You won't break his soul. It's Gary Jackson.
Oh, yes, baby. She is here. She's ready to do some musicality with you.
Release your stress. Release your mind. Release your job.
Bam.
Yes, and his Spotify Wrapped is essentially a Taylor Dane Greatest Hits album. It's Jonny Minogue.
Fun fact, it also smells like Aquanet and Benetton perfume. Ooh, take me back.
Your Aquanet reference is taking me higher. No, literally, the fumes are hitting me like poppers. I'm not complaining. So our best of episodes are a little different than our usual format. No polls, no brackets, barely even any debating. Our panelists are just going to do a pop culture show and tell of our individual top 3 albums for the year. These could be from any genre whatsoever: LPs, EPs, digital-only vinyl, no one cares. If it was new music released in 2022, it was up for grabs. Do you disagree with some of our picks? Do you want to add some of your own favorites to the discussion? Head to greatpopculturedebate.com and leave a comment on this episode, or find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Mastodon, Hive, Facebook. God knows what else will be out by the time this episode is released. But with that out of the way, let's get to the top 3s. I'm going to start in alphabetical order, and that means Andrea's up first with her first pick. What do you got?
My first pick is the wonderful Bjork album, Fossora, which Bjork defines as she who digs. I believe it's Latin, probably. But one of the reasons why I love this album is if you wanted a Bjork album, this is the Bjorkiest of Bjork albums within the last decade, easily. It's so wonderful. It feels like an orchestral interpersonal therapy session, but in a very good and positive way. It's deeply emotional and personal, just like Bjork is in general. But I think it's a little bit more heavy-handed in an honest way, unlike some of her past albums, which are generally filled with a lot of metaphors and layers, whereas this one is very much to the point. It's so lush, and everything that she does, including on this album, is just so intentional, down from the negative spaces that she leaves to the dissonance and the clarinets and the oboes, all the woodwinds in this album. And I really just want to see this album performed with like her and like a 3-piece choir and like a quartet of woodwinds with a few percussionists, because that's really all that is on this album. And I think it would just make a really beautiful live performance. It's full of themes of matriarchy and motherhood. I've read that some people have kind of compared it as a eulogy to her mother, who died a few years ago. And Bjork is in her 40s and she has older kids that are like 14 or 15. And so just wrestling with a lot of those concepts of what being a mom is, how you deal with the grief and the loss of your own mother, those feelings that come along with it. My favorite song from the album is called Ancestress, which is probably the pivotal eulogy to her mother, and it's coming to terms with the end. And there's a couple of lines that I really love in that album, or that song, where she says she had an idiosyncratic sense of rhythm, dyslexia, the ultimate free form, which I think is a really funny line, but it's also a very sweet way to honor her mother. But even with all the heaviness and emotional nuance to it, it's still just a very interesting and fun album to listen to.
Do you know if she is going to be touring to support it with that type of a band that you mentioned, or?
I have no idea. I think she's been pretty locked down since 2019.
Yeah.
She was already like a very isolated person. Like her house is like literally on an island, and that's all that's on the island is her house. It's just her off the coast of Iceland somewhere.
Yep.
But if she is touring with the album, I will gladly fly to Iceland to go see it performed.
I hear it's beautiful there. Has anybody else listened to the Bjork album?
I haven't, but it sounds like she's going, it's oh so quiet in every single aspect of her life. I haven't really listened to anything for since Vespertine, but I'm interested to see if it's very Bjorky. I'm interested in seeing where she's been in the last few years. What
was her last album before this? How long has it been?
I believe it was Utopia, maybe like 4 years ago.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting how the pandemic gave some artists a much longer break than I think they probably would have had otherwise, and how that's transformed their music. I'm seeing a lot of really thoughtful, contemplative stuff coming out now. They, like us, they went through the shit, and now it's a completely different album than they probably would have made had it not happened, right? It's kind of fascinating. Gary, have you listened to it at all or no?
I have not, but just from Andrew, you describing it, especially like the instrumental part of it, I think that is what's intriguing to me. I agree with Eric. I think it seems like this is more thoughtful from what you're describing it, Andrea, and just Bjork's journey. But I'm intrigued by it, and I think I definitely want to check it out.
And I will say the album cover is absolutely stunning. Just like gag, wrong.
All of the fungus and like the vaporwave colors. It's just so Bjork. Everything about the album is just so Bjork, and it's wonderful. And I love her, and she can do no wrong.
Yeah, we celebrate her. So thank you. Great first pick, Andrea. Speaking of albums called Utopia, my first pick, and I realized right before recording this, I actually don't know how this band is pronounced. I always pronounced it St. Lucia, but it could be St. Lucia, and it is St. Lucia's Utopia. Does anyone know if that's the way that you pronounce this act? Does anybody know this act? Johnny, I feel like it may be up your alley.
Oh, you pronounce it St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That's how you pronounce it.
Thank you. Very nice. I'm going to go with St. Lucia. If you're listening to this and you're actually St. Lucia, I'm very sorry. But I struggled to settle on a third pick for this year, not because there were no good options. There are actually too many good options, but I wanted to give something with a little bit different flavor than my other two picks. And I landed on Utopia by electro-pop band St. Lucia. I've loved this band for nearly a decade at this point, ever since Elevate and Dancing on Glass smashed into my Spotify recommendations, and the subsequent two albums, Matter and Hyperion, are loaded with driving bangers. So I had high hopes for Utopia, their first album in 4 years. Again, a recurring theme here. Initially released earlier in the year as Utopia 1 with only 6 songs, and then re-released again in the fall as just Utopia with 13 songs, including the 6 from Utopia 1. I was initially confused and felt slightly burned for having paid for the initial EP. Yes, I'm that sucker who still actually pays for music because I want to support the artists I love. But I couldn't stay mad at this for long because it's a terrific album. Separate World is the band doing what it does best, blasting, soaring synth melodies over verses that ratchet up the energy until it all crescendos into a great cathartic boom. One of the initial singles, Rocket on My Feet, was instantly added to my Struttin' That Ass playlist. You cannot deny those hooks, mama. Johnny, you remember fashion television Ani in the 90s. You know what I'm talking about. The opening credits. That is how I feel listening to this song. I am tall, I am thin, I am beautiful, I am giving it to you. It's such a great song. And then the subsequent single, Touch, has an infectious retro futuristic groove. Every song is good, and the album includes some softer sides of St. Lucia that I appreciated hearing kind of this long into their career. It sounds weird, but it's also a great driving album. There's lots of different levels to it, and just as you slip into one groove, it shifts into a completely different gear. For me, this was a highly satisfying listen. It's a terrific return for a band that I've missed for the past few years, and if you've never listened to them, you like electropop, you like driving anthems that just get you going. The lyrics are not exactly going to change your life, let me say that. Sorry if I'm offending anyone, but like it's music that grabs you and transports you. And St. Lucia does that really, really well. So has anyone here heard of St. Lucia? Gary?
I have not, actually.
I recommend checking them out. Jonny?
I've heard them. I'll go with St. Lucia. What the hell? Just to make sure.
Let's hedge our bets.
Let's hedge our bets. It's got to be one of the two of them. I actually have heard St. Lucia before. And I actually really enjoyed them. I kind of forgot that they were around. It's been a number of years since all the songs that came out, like Dancing on Glass and Love Somebody. It's been a while since that, so I kind of forgot about it, but it's not that I have had an issue with it. I would love to hear this going forward. I kind of feel like I've been in a bit of a kind of, not a rut. I've just been listening to the same few things over and over again. So I think that this will be something I'll add to my playlist in the new year.
Start with Rocket on My Feet, go to Separate Way. And by the way, thank you for reminding me. We're actually going to put together a playlist on Spotify with 3 picks from each of the albums that we're nominating, as well as 1 song each from each of our honorable mentions. So as I say, find them. Don't bother finding them. Go right to greatpopculturedebate.com. Go to our playlist section. It's going to be right there for you. Look at how much we give until it hurts. So anyway, thank you very much. With that, I'll turn it over to Gary for his first pick. What do you got for us?
Yes, but first, there's nothing wrong with giving, Eric. Some of us are givers, some of us are takers.
Exactly.
My first pick is Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And this album is an album that came out of during the COVID time as well. So just going back to kind of the theme that we're talking about of artists really having time to just breathe and pause. And what I love about this album is that it is like a concept album for him within the Black community in general, like with toxic masculinity. This is the album that I think Kendrick really tackles it, like talks about men needing to go to therapy. Black men in particular need to be in therapy. And this album is his journey through therapy. It reflects on his life experiences doing therapy. It weaves through themes in his childhood and generational trauma, infidelity. And then just, I think the concept of us being so putting celebrities on this pedestal. He really, really dives into that in like this raw way. This album is very explicit, so I'll just say that. So, but it really is unapologetic. And obviously, if you know Kendrick Lamar, he's won a Pulitzer for his previous album. So he's an incredible writer, lyricist. But what I do love about this album is that the style, the genre, it touches on such things as like jazz, R&B, trap music, and then soul music. And it really, like, he does such a fine job on each track, just weaving in and out of each of those genres. So it gives the listener something to listen to if you're not into like trap music. You know, there's a song that's soulful, you know. And then just going to the other side of like why I think this album is such an incredible album is that it was met with positive reviews from critics. It was top of the Billboard 200 and is Kendrick's 4th album to reach number 1, which is a feat for mainstream rap, and it's conscious rap at that. And he's received 8 nominations at the Grammy Awards for the 65th that's coming up for Best Rap Album and Album of the Year. And so I just think that, yeah, he really, really kind of is very vulnerable in a way that I don't think a lot of rappers and rap genre give space for. And then one of my favorite songs on the album is, I believe it's called We Love, is with kind of was Taylor Thompson, something like that. But it is basically about toxic relationships, and they just fight in the video, like just really, really like harsh to each other. And then they make up, and by make up, they have sex. And it just shows like that pattern, but it's so real. And so that is my first pick for best album of 2022.
Excellent. Jonny, I see you nodding your head. Have you listened to the album?
I haven't, but I've been appreciating some of Kendrick's work on other people's tracks, and I've really started to appreciate. And he has a conscious soul that is which is very kind of refreshing in hip hop sometimes. Especially, I feel like this having something that's almost a little bit more like have almost a folk music idea about how to songwrite and how to tell a story that he does in a very compelling way. So I haven't listened to this particular track, but with everything that Gary's talks about, I think it might be between Kendrick and Beyonce for album of the year this year. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Andrea, have you listened to it?
I have. I do love Kendrick. He's been one of my favorite artists to come up within the last decade easily. And just to echo what Gary had said about switching up genres and it's different from track to track. One of my favorite things that he did on this album was he brought in Beth Gibbons from Portishead on one of his tracks, which is like the funniest combination of people to me, but it's an amazing track. And, he does such a good job when he collaborates with people, giving them the space to be featured on the track and to still showcase his own talents.
Fabulous. Well, thank you, Gary. Terrific first pick. I will turn it over for our final round one pick to Jonny Minogue.
Okay, so my first pick this year is Wet Tennis by Sophie Tucker. So if you don't know who Sophie Tucker is, it's not the early 20th century actress singer Sophie Tucker.
Damn
She's long dead.
I thought it was a seance album.
Oh, well, we could make it into one. That'll be the third. That'll be the third album. That'll be the B-side.
That's dry tennis. Very dry. Kind of like your vagina.
Vagina. I still can't. I can't
do it. I can't.
I've tried. I've had drag queens try to teach me. It doesn't work. Anyway, moving along. So they're most famous for some tracks in 2017, 2018. One Best Friend ended up on an iPhone X ad that kind of rocket them to stardom. They have a very interesting kind of house pop melange of different sounds. He's Tucker Halpern, who's the DJ. He's a former basketball player. He's a Brookline, Massachusetts resident, or at least grew up there. So I appreciate that. Sophie Holly Weld, she's she's a singer-songwriter. She's coming from much more international backgrounds. So Wet Tennis, it's 35 minutes of dreamy house pop tracks, and it's got interspliced with tropical music, in percussion instruments, Middle East inspired vocals. There's a track Hold where the first part of the song is the Muslim call to prayer that is then put over a really thumping house track. But it's not something that's just going to be It's thought out. It's beautiful. It's thoughtful, but it's also kind of funny. Tuck has this very deep bass timbre in his voice that's sexy, but also a little funny at the same time. It's the Wet Tennis that makes me think when I'm watching Carlos Alcaraz when he's playing at Wimbledon. If you don't know, Google. Trust me, it's worth it. It's like the album feels like I'm drinking a sea breeze at a chic bar on South Beach on a breezy, warm night. That is all of the tracks. There are some. My favorite is collaboration with Turkish DJ Mehmet Orhan called Forgive Me. Again, it adds in some of that Middle Eastern influence just from the cellos and the background music. It's dreamy. It's almost kind of like an Ofra Haza backing track. It's haunting, but it's beautiful. And then there's a track called Larry Bird, which is literally Tuck's dad talking about a 1988 three-point shootout with Larry Bird. But you know what? Let's throw it over a beat and then add Tuck going Larry Bird at the very end of it. It's kind of something they would have heard at like Limelight in like the late 90s. It's amazing. Oh, you've heard this album before?
I actually listened to the album, and I swear I'm going to let you finish, Taylor. But Sophie Tucker had the best song of the year. No, that song came on, and everybody knows the Duck Sauce song Barbara Streisand. And this is the like dude bro version of Barbara Streisand. I know nothing about sports. I would never I don't want to know anything about sports, but I'm listening to Larry Bird and I was just like, oh, this Larry Bird sure does seem like a pretty interesting fellow. Like it's genuinely interesting.
It is true. It's like follow Carlo Alcaraz. That'll get you interested in sports, at least tennis. That will give you wet tennis. But anyway, I have enjoyed them from the moment go, from the first time I've ever heard them. It's just fun. It is interesting. And they have a type of house pop music that nobody else has or even does. And it's quintessential 100% Sophie Tucker.
Yeah. So I listened to the album because you'd been talking it up from back when you nominated it for Culture Club, which, sidebar, if you are not following us on social media, and mostly we have been doing this on the Bird app, and I'm not entirely sure, I guess we're moving that mostly to Mastodon now, but every Saturday our panelists nominate the things that they're loving in pop culture that week, TV shows, movies, albums, and so like, yes, we do these besties at the end of the year, but you could have been in the know months ago, honey, if you were following Culture Club, because he nominated this the week that it came out. So I listened to it. That first song is really kind of disarming because it does not sound like anything else on the album. I was like, oh, this is going to be a journey. But then after you get through that, like, initial rough, like, very aggressive sounding Cocky is what it's called, I think.
Yeah, it's Cocky, and it's also in Portuguese. A lot of the songs have some sort of Portuguese or Spanish element and lyrics inside of the song. And it doesn't have to be the whole thing. Sophie does it in a way, and actually Tuck does it. He usually doesn't speak in Portuguese, but he does on Wet Tennis.
Yeah, and like I'm just like, okay, I'm going with this. I'm going to keep going deeper. But as soon as that song's over, like, boom, I was like, yes, I am in. This is fabulous. It is gay. I mean, it's probably not actually gay, but it speaks to me as a homosexual man. It's got the house music, it's got the energy, the lyrics, or excuse me, the vocals, gorgeous vocals. So I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad you did.
Did anybody else
on Culture Club?
That's right. Did anybody else happen to listen to it? Andrea, Gary?
No, but I want this journey in my life, though. I think I'm going to check this out. I need something new. This is very refreshing.
Yeah, highly recommended. Andrea?
I need to go listen to Larry Bird immediately because that just sounds amazing.
Larry Bird. Even me trying to sound like a bass, I'm still like a fucking alto. It's so embarrassing.
The thing that's hilarious about it is that Tuck's father sounds like the guys in Coolidge Corner in Brookline, Massachusetts, who have nothing else to do but talk about sports. So it's hilarious. Andrea, you're going to love it.
Sports from 40 years ago specifically, which I think is the best part. So thank you. A terrific round one of nominations, everybody. With that, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back for round two of our picks after these messages. Welcome back to our Best of 2022 music episode. We're going to move right on to our second round of picks. And Andrea, you are up.
So my second album is the self-titled debut album, Wet Leg, band Wet Leg, album Wet Leg, which who knows where that name came from. I feel like there's a story there and I kind of don't want to know. It's more fun as a mystery. I initially wrote this duo off because they wouldn't leave my For You page on TikTok. That Chase Lounge song was like literally every time I opened TikTok, that song came on and I was like, I can't fucking handle this song anymore. But then I actually listened to the whole track and I was like, okay, I get it now. And when the album came out, it was just such a rock solid album to go along with that viral track. Because it was one of those tracks that to me felt like it was genuinely going to be a one-hit wonder and I would never hear from the band again. And then you listen to the album and every song is great and of the same caliber as Chase Lounge. It's about navigating your life in your mid to late 20s. It's silly, it's funny, it's British, it doesn't take itself seriously. They sound constantly disengaged and bored, but like in a really good Courtney Barnett sort of way. You can tell there's a lot of influence from Courtney Barnett, Lucy Dacus, Sleater-Kinney, just a lot of kind of like sludge rock women. It's just such a beautiful album made by a couple of women from middle of nowhere, UK. I don't even remember the city that they're from, but I don't think it was super notable. A lot of people think that they are industry plants, which whatever that means at this point in the 2020s, I mean, the music industry is what it is. And even if that is the case, I don't care because they're talented and they sound great. My favorite song from that album is called Loving You, and it has a lot of themes about just not being the bigger person in a breakup, which I love, like, because the idea of having to be the bigger person in every scenario is overrated. Couple of lines from that song, they sing, I don't want to have to pretend. I don't want to have to be friends. I don't want to have to pretend. Don't call me up. You fucked it up. I'm not your friend. I'm not your pal, which we can all relate to that when it comes to ending a relationship. You know, you want to like keep your cool with them and like stay buddy buddies or whatever. Like, oh, we'll still be friends. Like, you know, you don't have to be friends. It's okay to not be friends with an ex. But it's my equivalent of Olivia Rodrigo's album from last year, from Brutal. It's kind of along that same theme and relatability. And I want everyone to listen to it, especially if you got annoyed by Chase Lounge like I did.
I loved this album. And again, I listened to it because you were like, you were on the pulpit being like, wet leg, it's amazing. And then they end up getting nominated for a ton of Grammys. Like they're actually they've been embraced. I don't care if they're industry plants. Who cares? Oh no, the music industry is trying to force someone on me. That's never happened before. Like it's just so silly. But what I loved about it, and I don't know if you're going to agree with me, be like, no, you're wrong. To me, it had this kind of like indie rock 90s vibe to it. And I was like, ooh, we need this. We need this right now in the industry. It's just such a completely different type of sound. And we need to shake things up. I think you need that for music every few years. And I think we're overdue. I loved the whole thing. I thought it was like, yes, they sound bored, but it was playful boredom, right?
Yeah, it's very playful, very silly. And it feels like an album that I would kind of come across at like my local dive bar, like indie band sort of thing, like a hometown band that's like kind of popular, kind of not. I could just like see myself like drinking a Black Label while watching this band and pounding shitty beers.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because as I'm listening to it, I'm like, I'm sure they will be selling out stadiums soon if they are not already. But like the place where these people should be performing is in a shitty dive bar to like 20 people who are like half paying attention, and like some guy passed out in the bathroom, and that guy is me. But no, I think you did a great job. Has anyone else listened to it? Gary, have you?
So I have not heard of this band, but I think Eric, you make a good point about the ways that we can listen to all of these choices, because I have some listening to do. So thank you, Andrea.
That is the point of this episode. So thank you, Gary. And have you listened to it, Jonny, or no?
I've heard Chaise Long. That one I've heard when I was over in London this summer. It was pretty much everywhere. And Andrea, to answer your question, they're from the Isle of Wight, which is famous for where Queen Victoria used to go on vacation. So
why's it got to be white?
I was like, well, it's Queen Victoria, so what do you expect?
Yeah, seriously. No, well, excellent job, Andrea. Terrific second pick. I will go next with mine, which is Lizzo's Special. Confession, at first I was not in love with this album. I was always in like with it. But as someone who's been a Lizzo stan since before Good as Hell even broke, initially I found that there was something off about the energy. The songs are all good. Some are among her best, actually, including About Damn Time, To Be Loved, and The Sign. But over and over again, it felt like the typically chill and like breezily confident Lizzo was just trying too hard in it. Like, how many times does a grown woman need to throw around the term bitch before you start to wonder, who are you trying to convince of your coolness, me or you? But the more I listened to Special, the more I realized it is actually incredibly authentic. Songs like If You Love Me, Naked, I Love You, Bitch, set aside the typical effervescent positivity that has defined much of her previous output. And while Lizzo has always been an amazing role model for self-love and body positivity, in Special, she actually lets us in. And she shares that she sometimes struggles to feel good about herself, to love herself. And I find that incredibly brave. And if you listen to this album, not as just Lizzo guessing you up, but also partially guessing Lizzo herself up, after the past few years, like, yeah, who has not had difficult moments? And how incredible that Lizzo, who is absolutely peaking right now, she is incredibly relevant to culture, not just pop culture, but like culture in general. She took this album to let everyone know what life is actually like for her. And in that way, it is truly remarkable. At the end of the album, she shares an audio note that she wrote almost 170 songs for this project, and she only chose 12 of them, specifically curating the ones that would speak to the world about all kinds of love, which she believes can actually change the world. And I'm like, yes, Lizzo. Yes, she is exactly right. Special really is special. And I'm grateful for Lizzo as an artist, as an activist, and just as a human being who is so full of grace and humanity. What a blessing that she is in these dark times, honestly. And I really love this album. It took me a minute to get past my like, what is this kind of like energy that you're trying to thrust on me? But once I made that peace with it, I was like, no, she's actually doing a huge favor and being very real. So has anyone else listened to the album?
So I actually agree with you, Eric. When I first heard this album, Lizzo's album, I was like, it's trying too hard. I was like, seems very like typical Lizzo. But following her on social media and just seeing the amount of hate that she receives, it makes sense. So the idea of what you're saying, is she proving to herself or is she proving to us that like she's that bitch and this whole positivity, body positivity and all these things? I think, yes, I think all of it. I think that she, again, showing us this is what she's going through. She's going through all this, the bullying and stuff constantly, daily, and she's Lizzo. Yep. And I think she's giving us a voice in general, but just knowing that through it all, she has remained positive. She's have done incredible things. She's pushed culture further in a positive way for people that look like her, look like me, look like you. And I agree. I think this album now is deeper than like you would just automatically assume. And I love her for that. And I thank her for just being so raw and vulnerable and using art and creativity in this way to tell her story.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that, Gary. And I will say that if you look at what a year she's had, and I would argue that it's between Lizzo and Bad Bunny for the two artists that have had the biggest impact on pop culture this year. And I will gladly hear arguments from other people on that. But she's not only got this album, she had her award-winning Emmy. I think it won an Emmy reality show on Amazon. She has a special on HBO right now. She launched a line of loungewear. She is just, I'm going to use a term that she would repulse at, but it's a 30 Rock term that I love. She's Reaganing right now. And the fact that she is releasing an album in which she's like, yes, love yourself. But even me in this time in my life, I have days where I can't love myself and I feel terrible and I deal with all this stuff. Like, I can't think of another artist who has done something at that level personally when they are peaking. It truly is. It took me a minute to get there, but when I did, I was so grateful for it. Has anyone else listened to it?
I've listened to it. I had the same feeling about it, but there were some tracks that I loved. Maybe it's just because I'm maybe a little cheesy, but I loved the Coldplay the song at the end of the track. I enjoyed it. I mean, that also reminds me back when Coldplay was great and they weren't completely high on themselves and they weren't gooped up at that point. One of the things that I think Lizzo has that is really hard nowadays is, there's not much of a monoculture anymore. There's only a very few number of artists, movies, things that come through that more often than not, people will know who it is. I mean, everything is so segmented. Everyone's in their own genres through different types of platforming. But Lizzo has started to make that cross into the monoculture of what's left of it in a way that very few people have been able to do. And this year, I think she did it more than anyone else.
Yep.
Like my mother knows who Lizzo is. So that's I mean, she got shit for playing a flute that nobody knew about. That was in the archives. They all got up in arms about. I mean, that is something that someone in the larger culture can only make happen. So
yeah,
100%.
And I want the opera Lizzo and the Crystal Flute. And it's all about fucking dusty ass haters losing their minds. So, Andrea, any thoughts on Lizzo?
Yeah, just echoing what everyone else said. To Johnny's point, she is one that's sort of like broken through the different barriers to kind of become this huge public persona. My 70-year-old Vietnam veteran father knows who Lizzo is and loves her, you know. I had the privilege and honor and religious experience of seeing her in October in Detroit, in her hometown. And it was me and my sister, and we've been big Lizzo fans just as like bigger women that have like gone through a lot in our lives, a lot like Lizzo has. When she sang Special, the title track of the album, literal tears, just bawling our eyes out. And I've never like cried at a concert before. Of course, it would be at a Lizzo concert where I'm like going from shaking my ass to bawling my eyes out. Where else can you do that but a Lizzo concert?
I feel that is exactly what she wants, and I feel like it's the closest that liberals are ever going to get to a tent revival. I hope for their sakes. So thank you. I'm glad that we could all let the church say amen for Lizzo. With that being said, I will get off of the pulpit and pass it over to Gary for his second pick.
Okay, so still on the women empowerment train, because I think this next person, not necessarily like I didn't want to put it as like a honorable mention album, because I think it where it stands in terms of the writing and the reason behind it, I think it is definitely worth a bigger discussion such as this. Is Megan Thee Stallion's second album. I think it's Traumatized, something like that.
Traumazine.
Yeah, and obviously, Megan blew up, came on the scene, and like we know her as the hot girl, you know, hot girl summer, like just very, very just like playful fun and just like trap music ish. And then everything happened, you know, her domestic violence with her boyfriend getting shot. And I think this album was just like a self-realization. It was a reflection of how the media treated her, how the culture treated her, trauma, violence. And I think it was just like her way of reclaiming herself, her identity, and owning herself again. I think that as fans, I think, again, as the media, I think that we picked her apart. And this album, like each song is heavier and heavier. And I think it is so raw. It is literally, if you were reading her diary, and it's in music. And I remember watching her SNL performance, and it was one of the songs was a tribute. She was trying to get through the song about her mom, and the way that the support came out, but the way that she allowed herself to be so vulnerable. I don't think that this album is for commercial success at all. I think this is a healing album from her, and I love that. Like, I truly love that. And I am glad that she is forcing us to have this conversation around relationships and toxic relationships in the media, and how we portray women and victims and in general, especially in rap and rap culture, and then just culture itself. But I think it just shows the power of music and art and how it's important for expression and sharing. And so not necessarily like pick this one for the commercial side again, but I think it's a bigger conversation, and I'm thankful again for Megan for creating it. So Megan Thee Stallion.
Yeah, I loved Megan going into the album. I think she is one of two rap artists, and I'll say specifically female rap artists, who absolutely just dazzle me with their lyrics. She's one. The other is Cupcake, who I adore, but it's a completely different type of dazzling. Like, when is the Cupcake breakthrough? Literally never, because there are XXX movies that are less filthy than Cupcake. But anyway, then I listened to this album on release day, and I literally was just like, whoa, like song after song. It is like it's heavy. And it's really well written. It is incredibly emotionally raw. But I was just like, woof. Like, it takes it out of you listening to it. God, what a talent that Megan is. She can do everything. And I agree with you. This is probably not an album that she was looking to have huge financial success. I mean, obviously, everyone wants to album be successful. This was a message album. This was something she had to get off of her chest. Yeah. Has anyone else listened to it?
Go ahead, Andrea.
I have listened to it. It's amazing. Megan Thee Stallion is one of my favorite female rappers to come out on the scene, probably since like Missy Elliott. Her flow and her lyricism is just unparalleled in the 2020s. And I know Cardi B kind of like blew up when she did. But Megan just does not get enough credit for her technical skill.
Yeah, for sure. It's mind-blowing what she does. Jonny?
I haven't listened to it. I looked at the album art, and this will age me. It reminded me, it had the same kind of power and like kind of, I don't want to say anger, but just like force that the cover of Order in the Court by Queen Latifah, her album from 1998, it was kind of her last rap album. It's like the one album that she got parental advisory sticker on it. So I was like, there was like a direct line for me from that particular album to Megan Thee Stallion's new album. So whether or not it has the same vibe, I just visually, just from the aesthetic, that's what I have. But yeah, it sounds like something like that.
It's really quite the work of art, to be honest with you. So thank you so much, Gary. Great pick. Jonny, do you want to close out round 2 with your second pick?
Sure. So I'm staying with female empowerment in a way. I'm going with Big by Betty Who. So if you don't know Betty Who is, she's been around for about 10 years. She first started back in 2014 with the release Somebody Loves You. She also did in 2016 a cover of the Donna Lewis classic from 96 called I Love You Always Forever. They both ended up on the dance charts. So she's originally from Australia, went to Berklee College of Music. She's very inspired by the pop and synth music of the 80s and early 90s. I've enjoyed her. I went to her concert. First time I went to see her, my friends got engaged on stage to Somebody Loves You. So I always had a good affinity to it. Although her last album I wasn't a fan of, so I didn't really get into it. I was just kind of like, all right, new album. It seemed a lot of rehash of her last previous work from the 5 years before that. And quite frankly, it wasn't until there's this guy who I follow in social media named Joey from Chicago. I don't know him, but I just enjoy him on social media in multiple reasons. But he was incessant with his posting about Big. So I think it was Stockholm Syndrome that actually got me into listening to it. But Joey was right. So she still lives in that world of 80s synth pop, but it's grown up. She's not the same, just kind of young ingenue, just singing about love or doing a grown-up karaoke version of a song from 20 years ago. She really has gone through and done something different. When like the first track, which is the title track, Big, I was like, is this a Roxette Lost track? It has that same vibe. It was like the grandchild of Listen to Your Heart. And it was like, but the lyrics of it are empowering. She's talking about being that young, when she was young, feeling insecure, but I'm big. I'm a big person. I'm somebody who is just larger than where I'm coming from. And I appreciate that, because who hasn't been there at some point? One of her tracks, Blow Out My Candle, which was the first single released. I mean, that is the best blowjob you've missed in a song since Like a Prayer. I don't think she was meaning it that way, but girl, come on. It's supposed to be about more empowerment, but really the lyrics end up sounding more like lackluster fellatio. It's like you can blow out my candle, but you'll never put out my fire. That's, for me, says it right there. I think the one thing that really made me say I love the song wasn't until the very last track, Grown Ups Grow Apart. It is such a divergent from her work before. There's not that upbeat synth vibe. It's her with a bunch of strings, piano backing track, and some guitars. And it actually made me cry. I'm not a crier. I don't do that. That's not my thing. Unless I slam my hand in a car door. Other than that, and I wasn't, because I don't have a car. But it was relaying about how friendships oxidize over time, and how you could be so close to someone as you're growing up in those formative years, but then they become virtual strangers to you. And how do you deal with that? And how it's like you still have those feelings, but you've just grown apart. It was giving me chills even just talking about it right now. So thank you, Joey, wherever you are. But if you haven't listened to this album, please do yourself a favor and get yourself onto whatever platform you have and check it out.
Yeah, I have always liked Betty's stuff. I've enjoyed it. I've always felt like I'm gonna get into so much trouble here. There were elements of it that felt like student work to me. That is a specific Project Runway read, but it's like it's technically very good, but it's deliberately trying to do a little bit extra just so you can be like, and you're very special. So it wasn't quite there for me before, even though it was very enjoyable. This album was the fully realized artist, absolutely kind of taking ownership. Like, no, this is my sound and I'm doing this because this is what I want to do. I'm not trying to impress you. It's funny that you think that the title track sounds like a Roxette song to me. To me, it feels very much like This Is Me from The Greatest Showman. It has that energy. There's a theatricality to it. And this is the dumbest thing I will say all hour. I'm actually going to state my claim on this. The Thanksgiving Day Parade was on, and Betty Who was on one of the floats, and she did Light My Fire, and it was hands down the best performance in the Thanksgiving Day Parade. That is damning with faint praise. Absolutely. As we all know, watching, God bless her, Paula Abdul, shamefully attempt to lip sync. But don't forget Mariah Carey looking so uncomfortable in her corset that I thought she was going to explode all over Santa Claus. The Mariah Carey refusing to go through the actual parade route, being dropped onto a giant star, singing for 5 minutes and was, get me the fuck out of here. Icon. But anyway, I digress. No, but like Betty Who completely stole it. Like, I think I will put money that little moment on that stupid parade, she probably got 10,000 downloads off of that because she did a great job selling that song. She has that fully realized version. I think it took a number of years, and you're right. She was a student. A lot of the stuff she did in her initial stuff was stuff that she did when she was at Berkeley College. So she's grown, and I'm glad that you were on the same page with me on that. Yeah, and good for her, right? Because a lot of people don't grow and don't see it through. I'm very proud of her. I know that's a corny thing to say. I don't know this woman. She's a big woman. But I'm very proud of a student actually like pushing themselves and evolving. You know, kudos to her. So has anybody else listened to it? Andrea, Gary?
I have not, actually. It's thank you, Jonny, for sharing that, because it's very interesting. And some of the songs that you referenced, I was like, oh, okay, now I can envision the album or like the genre, but never heard of her either. But thank you.
And she's very queer, I don't know if she herself is, but it definitely appeals to that area. She identifies as bisexual queer. Yeah. Andrea, anything from you?
I haven't listened to the album. I've never personally been a huge Betty Who fan. It's just not my personal taste. But I did see that performance on the stupid parade. And even I was like, all right, props, Betty. And it did make me want to actually go check out the album. So that is my homework that I'm taking away from this episode.
Perfect. We love to hear it. So thank you, Jonny. With that, we're going to take another quick break, and we will be right back for our final round of picks for our favorite albums of the year. We are back with the last round of our Best of 2022 music episode. Before we wrap things up, I want to ask my panel, where can people find you on social media? What else have you got going on? And were there any honorable mention albums that you wanted to talk about briefly? Andrea, I'll start with you.
You can find me on the Bird app and on Mastodon, Dre Souffle. I've recently started an Etsy shop where I'm going to start selling more stickers and vinyl decals. So you can find that stuff there. The shop name is Dre Designs. I made it like 10 years ago, never used it, and that's what it is now. And then my honorable mention is going to be Coping Mechanism by Willow, which is a really fun, less than 30-minute album by Willow Smith, where she really embraces her emo and pop punk side, and every track is a banger. My favorite is the title track, Coping Mechanism. Go check it out. Like I said, it's like 25 minutes long, so you don't really have a reason to not listen to it. So just go give it a listen and make sure you're giving her those streams.
I had no idea that was a thing. And if anybody needed a coping mechanism in 2022, it was Willow Smith. So thank you. Great. Gary, what about you?
You can find me on IG at Gary Music Man J. Trying to stay off the Bird app. And I'm still new to TikTok. And I don't know how to work it yet, but I'm somewhere there on TikTok as well. Not dancing, but my honorable mention album is Regina Spektor's 1111. It's kind of a step away from her like bluesy, jazzy style. It's alternative a little bit. But I don't know. I like when I listen to the album, it makes me smile. Vocally, I love her vocals, her piano playing, obviously. And I'm just glad to see her come back. And I think she's an album a concert that I'm like wanting to see, and I'm hoping that she is going to tour here. But it's a little departure from my normal music style, so I love it.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. Jonny, what about you?
I am on mostly everything as Jonny Minogue, including the Bird app, but I usually just keep that for porn. I also am on Truth Social as the fake Lauren Boebert.
I thought you were joking about that, but you're actually real, are you?
I don't post on it very often.
That's real.
What's real is the fake Lauren Boebert.
That's amazing.
And I haven't posted in a while, but I'm there. And apparently I have to go on Mastodon now, so I'll be looking into that. So hopefully, if no one else steals it by the time you hear this, I'll be Jonny Minogue on that. My big project is Tuesday night. I am host of trivia at Club Cafe in Boston, 209 Columbus Avenue, right in the South End. And we do it every Tuesday from 8 to 10. And we love to have you there. We have themes. It's a lot of fun. And I try to keep it as lighthearted and gay as fuck as possible.
And you succeed, having done it. You do a great job.
Thank you very much. My honorable mentions are two. One is Weather Alive by Beth Orton. So Beth Orton is I first knew about her back in the 90s. She's very trip hop kind of folk music, and I haven't heard her in a long time, but she came back with this amazing album kind of in the vein of the work that she did on her album Central Reservation. It's very haunting. It's very interesting. It's very, there's a lot of feels to it. But she also, her voice has gotten older. So she also has a Marianne Faithfull raspy quality to it. So her voice before is always in the 90s was a lot more harmony, a little more of a singing, longing, yearning to it. But now it's kind of like she's been around the block a little bit. And it's honestly, whatever she's been doing, it's worked amazing. She's alive, Weather Alive. Check it out. The other album that I was on my honorable mention is Viva La Vengeance by Panic at the Disco. I'm an absolute humongous Brendon Urie fan. I came very late to the game with that, but I enjoyed the album. I think it's still ties into a lot of the previous Panic at the Disco kind of bombast, fun, beautiful vocals, piano. it wasn't. It was like number 4. My number 3 track actually took over the spot that Panic at the Disco did live in. So I did enjoy it. I think I didn't enjoy it as much as some of the other Panic at the Disco albums, but for this year, it was great. When I was on the tube in London, it was on every single station I was at. There was Panic at the Disco, Buy It Today. I didn't, but I did listen to it, and you all should do too.
Excellent. Thank you. Is Beth Orton Bottle of Jesus? Was that her song in the 90s?
Central Reservation was one of her big songs. I think Bottle of Jesus, was her too. Yeah.
That is a song that should be a Drag Race lip sync, by the way. That is a girl. Yeah.
Maybe if that's, I think, that is her. Yeah. That is her.
So thank you for that.
Season 5.
Seriously. All right. So I'll do my honorable mentions first. There are 2 big ones that I'll do. One is Years and Years Night Calls, which was like, I think out January 2nd. Like seriously, it was right at the beginning of the year, and it has some fabulous songs on there. I've become a little bit of an Ollie Alexander crush. And Starstruck was out in 2021, but to me, it was the song of that year. It was such a good single. It still holds up. And there's a bunch of other terrific songs. If you like gay and pop, you will love Years and Years Night Call. It just missed my top 3. It was definitely in consideration. And then I am the world's biggest Dragonette fan. Nobody else has ever heard of this band. They are a Canadian indie pop band, and they were gone for, I want to say, 6 years, maybe 7. And they were back with 20s. It was very exciting for me when this album came out. The great songs on there, New Suit, the title track. There's a couple other real just vicious banger songs. The only reason it didn't make my top 3 is it's real short. Like if my one-way commute, your album starts to loop, I need more content after waiting for 6 years. I was so patient. But it's great. And I love it. And I love them. And I'm so glad to hear them back. I will be putting at least one song, maybe more, because I'm the boss and I can do that, on our playlist that you should go listen to on greatpopculturedebate.com. But it was a very welcome comeback. And I will also say it's not on the album, which kind of drove me slightly insane, but they did a terrific collaboration with the Knox, another band that I adore, called Slow Song. And the video features Aquaria from Drag Race Season 10. It's a beautiful song. Aquaria is fucking stunning in the video. And that is a great introduction to Dragonette, and you should listen to that. The other one I will mention, because if we don't, people will be like, well, what about this? Taylor Swift's Midnights is a really good album, y'all. And I was a little iffy on it at first. It came out the same day as Carly Rae Jepsen's The Loneliest Time. I initially gave round 1 to Carly, but in subsequent listings, Midnights is a really solid album. And I'm just going to mention it because I know it's like, Taylor, whatevs. But God damn it, she's good at what she does. So there you go. You can find me at Eric Rezsnyak on all of the things, and make sure that you're following at culture_debate on Twitter for now, at Great Pop Culture Debate on Instagram for now, and at GPCD on Mastodon and Hive, as we'll be slowly migrating our activity to those channels. Big shout out to Mastodon already. They've been wonderful and they've embraced us, and we're so grateful. It's a terrific community. If you're on the fence about where to go now that Twitter is being run by an insane billionaire douchebag who seems hellbent on destroying democracy, as one does, try out Mastodon. It's a bit intimidating maybe at first, but once you get past that server thing, I promise you it's actually very easy, and really lovely gals over there, just lovely gals. So back to these final picks, round 3. Andrea, take it away.
So I want to preface this one by saying that my mother did me the disservice of not teaching me Spanish when I was young. And I am only 6 months into my 100th attempt at my Duolingo Spanish course. So bear with me a little bit. So my third and final pick is Un Verano Sin Ti by Bad Bunny, which we've kind of alluded to already. And I do just want to run off some facts about this album real quick, because it is a juggernaut of an album for 2022. And I don't know if non-Spanish speaking people in the US really understand how big of an album this is. Okay, so it debuted at number 1 on the US Billboard 200. It is Bad Bunny's second number 1 album and the second all Spanish language album to hit number 1 on the Billboard 200. The first one was Linda Ronstadt. The second best-selling non-English album in the US, again, Linda Ronstadt took that one. He sold 2.3 million units versus Linda's 2.5 million. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's already surpassed that by this point. Yeah. It has topped the year on Billboard charts for Billboard's independent albums, and Latin rhythm albums. It achieved the biggest streaming week for a Latin album in the US with over 356.66 million streams and the most for any album since Drake's Certified Lover Boy, which was also a juggernaut of an album. It is the most streamed album of 2022 on Spotify, both in the US and globally. It spent more time at number 1 on the Billboard 200 than any other album this year. And most importantly, which just like pulls at my heartstrings, it is the first all Spanish language album to be nominated for an Album of the Year at the Grammys. Not the Latin Grammys, the Grammys. All Spanish, first Spanish album to do that. That's an insane list of accolades for anyone. But Bad Bunny, he's like 25, maybe 26 probably. And the fact that he's just achieved all of this already, and I think this is like his 4th studio album, is just groundbreaking. And it just speaks volumes to his songwriting and the honoring that he does to his Puerto Rican roots and the influences from his Dominican counterparts. He spent a lot of time in the DR in the summers as a kid. He grew up in Puerto Rico. This album was half recorded in Puerto Rico and the other half in the DR. And you can hear that with every single track. It is just like a magical ride through all the different sounds of Central America with reggaeton, reggae, bamba, Dominican mamba, bachata. All things Latin are present in this 23-track album. It's a huge album. And one of the best parts about the album is it doesn't feel like 23 tracks. You know, you hear 23 tracks and you're like, oh my God, that's a long fucking album. No, it doesn't feel like that at all. And he does a good job breaking it up into an A side, B side. It is the perfect summer album, I think, for 2022. Whether or not you subscribe to the idea that we're in a pandemic or not still, spoilers, we are. This did still feel like the first sort of normal, quote unquote, summer that we've had since 2019. And that's what this album feels like, is just a perfect beachy summer. It's about hanging out with your friends on the beach. It's about losing loved ones. It's about ending of relationships. It's about different political stances regarding Puerto Rico and everything that is going on there, which we don't have time for that. And it's just a love letter to Latin music. It feels like you're experiencing everything that he has experienced in his summers, and it feels like you are creating a dance hall in your own house. It's just a truly wonderful album, and it just makes my heart so happy to see him succeeding, not only as a musician, but in everything else that he's doing too. He's becoming an actor. He was just in Bullet Train. He's playing a Marvel anti-hero soon called El Muerto, which I don't know that character, but I'm very excited for it.
He's getting his own movie, literally his own headlining movie. So
they were like, "You're great. Here's a movie for you."
Yeah.
He is an activist both in humanitarian aid and LGBTQ+. He stands up for transgender rights. He describes himself as fluid sexually. He's dabbled in drag. He is really just this beacon of hope, and I'm like lost for words at describing him, because he's really just that terrific of a person. And it just makes me really happy to see this coming out of the Latin community who historically has a lot of issues with toxic masculinity. And for him to come through and be like, no, fuck that. Like, here's how it needs to be. I'm paving the way for what's to come, what should be. He's great. I love him, if you couldn't tell. My favorite song is Titi Me Pregunto, which means Auntie asked me. And it reminded me of like Mambo number 5 of the 2020s, because he like lists off all these girls. It's Gabriella, Patricia, Nicole, Sophia, Maria, Talia. He's got a Colombian woman. He's got a Mexican woman, San Antonio, PR, Dominican, like just women everywhere. And I just thought that was a really cute homage to Mambo number 5. But yeah, go listen to the album. I hope you love it as much as I do. And I just get really excited thinking about it. And I also want to say, I know we kind of talked about the toss up between Beyonce and K-Dot for Album of the Year. I think that's my official prediction, is that this is going to take Album of the Year. I hope it does.
It actually is a really exciting race for that this year. And we talked a little bit earlier about how, like, I was saying Lizzo and Bad Bunny are kind of my two for like having the like artist of the year just trajectory. And I actually think Bad Bunny's only going to go higher. I think he had an amazing year. This is a juggernaut album, just huge breakthrough success. But when that Marvel movie comes out, and it's not just going to be that, right? There's going to be a whole thing. Doesn't he also have like a design collaboration with, is it Adidas? Am I wrong?
I hope it's Adidas, because they need a new spokesperson.
They do need a new spokesperson. There's someone. I think he's doing it with someone. But bottom line, I think he's just going to keep getting higher. And if you're not on the train now, I would encourage you to do so. It's a really fun album. Has anybody else listened to it?
I've listened to it. I love it. I listened a couple times, but I was really into it. It just wasn't necessarily a genre I would normally listen to, but I go, all right, yeah, I'm behind this. I was reaching back into my high school and college era Spanish to try to pick up on things. Surprisingly, I'm getting better at it. But yeah, I agree. I think this was a lot of fun. I don't necessarily know. I haven't listened to it enough to say it would be album of the year, but what I would say is that I thoroughly enjoyed it. So if you put it on again, I would be totally down with partying along with it.
Fabulous. Gary, have you listened?
I have not listened to it, but I know him to be really culturally like pushing, like what Andrea you're talking about, like going past the toxic masculinity thing in the Latin community. I've known the buzz of him doing that, and just really been unapologetically himself. I mean, and he's extremely attractive.
Absolutely.
On top of being his age, super talented. And so I agree, Eric. I think it's only up from here for him. And I'm just glad that he's a good person who is finally getting to his flowers and the success. And so definitely, I think I also want to check out the album as well.
For sure. Definitely do that. Thank you, Andrea. I'm so glad. And as much as Andrea was just like, I can't stop gushing over Bad Bunny, here I come, because I'm not going to be able to stop gushing over my number one pick, which is Muna's self-titled album, Muna. When this album came out in May, I instinctively knew that it would take something massive to knock it out of my top spot for album of the year. And while there have been some truly excellent albums since, nothing has spoken to me as directly, as evocatively as indie pop and indie pop's Muna and this album. From dreamy opening track Silk Chiffon, featuring label owner Phoebe Bridgers as a guest, to the superlative single Anything But Me, there is literally not a single flaw I can pick out of this album. And I'm a judgmental bitch, but this album is just perfection. The lyrics are witty, insightful, defiant. The hooks are crazy. How many days did I have the hornball rage from What I Want pounding in my head? And my God, it is so emotional. Runner's High, Home by Now, Anything But Me, Kind of a Girl. Like, they had me actually feeling feelings, and I don't like that, but I was having them. These are all women who are like probably 20 years my junior. And yet I found myself thinking, how are you in my head? It was a terrific year for Muna overall, as their cover of Britney Spears' Sometimes was featured in the promo for Fire Island, and Semi-Inescapable right around the beginning of the summer. But if you're anywhere on the queer spectrum, or even if you just like brilliantly crafted pop music that actually says something, you should absolutely add Muna to your heavy rotation. Also, it's really fun. I feel like I'm being very serious and it's very emotional and all this stuff, but like, it's fun music. It's catchy. It like makes you happy to listen to. And then the next song will make you sad. But start with this album, go back, check out the rest of the band's discography. I Know a Place is off of their first album in 2017, and it is as relevant, if not more relevant now than ever, especially with the attacks going on in the gay community. Muna is an essential band for the 2020s, and I couldn't be more happy for them and this album. I want only huge success. Has anybody else listened to it? No.
No, sorry.
That's okay.
But
Go
you
ahead.
have such passion about it. So, I mean, now it's kind of like, all right, well, if you've enjoyed it that much, it can't be bad. At least
promise. Yes. And if you take anything from this episode, and I was saying this in the TV episode too, like we could sit here and talk about the Taylors and whatever. Everybody knows about those. But one of the reasons I put this album on the top for me, in addition to it genuinely being my favorite of the year, is more people need to hear about it. And I'm hopeful that this will maybe open some doors for them. So do check that out. Thank you for letting me do my Muna fan club bit. Gary, I'm going to turn it over to you for your third pick.
All right. So obviously we cannot do this without talking about Beyonce, of course. Listeners and panel, you all know Renaissance came and still here. But I think it was predictable. It's predictable. Just like it was going to be a top album or an album that we're going to talk about, but just wanting to talk more on like the culture reset that it was. Is dance, is house, is a step away from Beyonce's traditional vocal ballads. And I think that is what I love about the album. And then it came, the first single was We Need to Get Outside, basically, like, is conceptualism. It talks about being like joy and what did I write? I wrote just a reflection of COVID and being isolated and to just move from that and just like be free and have fun. But I think what I love the most about this album is that it highlights the minority community and ballroom. Yes, it's flavorful, but I think that it is really paying giving the flowers to the ball scene, to the Black and brown community. It has on the album has like Grace Jones on it. Mm-hmm. Tim's, I believe is how you say her name. Like It is phenomenal. And what I think a lot of people has noticed is that the interlude, like into each song, is masterfully done. It is beautiful. It's sassy. I have not stopped listening to this album. I really feel like what people are saying, like it must be crack or something in it, because it puts me in a good mood. Like it is one of those albums, just like you automatically go in a good mood. My favorite single on the album is Alien Superstar. I feel my oats. I feel like I want to put on my high heels. I feel like I want to strut. Like I feel so powerful and I feel so feminine. And I feel like I own that, and it's so unapologetic. And it makes me like I'm paying tribute to that and through Beyonce. And I love that it's so obvious, but for her, like she's just like so coy about it, And I love her mindset. I love how she started a dialogue. Like she came on and she was a talk of the town, and then she went away again. Like only Beyonce can do something like that, and keep you wanting more and waiting. Beyonce, we're waiting. If you're listening to this, we're waiting for Renaissance Part 2. But just going, because we were talking about the Grammys and the album of the year. It has reached critical acclaim. Is record-breaking 9 nods at the Grammys for this year, including album of the year, song of the year. It debuted at #1 on both 100 and 200 Billboard. It is her 7th album to do so. So anything she touches is gold. and I just think it's very innovative for her, and I have not taken it, like, stopped listening to it, and I just think we need this type of music in this time. And yeah, if you have not, which that means you've been living under a rock, please go listen to the album, stream it, give our girl more flowers because she deserves them all. And I think she's going to win album of the year for this one. So Renaissance is my absolute favorite album of this year.
So when Break My Soul came out, the day it came out, I was in Boston. I was at your trivia, Jonny, and I was with the gays of the BGMC, and they were all talking about it. I'm just like, I don't know. It's okay. It's like, it's fine. I was looking.
We were together.
More. We were together, and I get myself in trouble with the gays because they're just like, what are you doing? Why are you not just like loving Beyonce? And it was just like, listen, I appreciate her as an artist. I've always appreciated her as an artist, but the music wasn't moving me. Then the album comes out. This album is fire. The whole thing, front to back. And you said we needed this. We needed this. I think Beyonce needed this. It is sexual. It is healing. It's sexual healing. But like in all seriousness, like it is a really terrific album. And then my kind of reservations about Break My Soul, they did the Queen remix of Break My Soul, and that is heaven if you have not heard it. It takes what was already a good song, and it was exactly what I was looking for. That was the spice I needed that was missing from the original. No, it's tens across the board to take the ballroom theme to the kind of infinite. It is exactly the album that I wanted Beyonce to make, so kudos. I'm assuming Jonny has some thoughts.
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts. So you're saying the Queen's remix, that was number one. First of all, Grace Jones twice.
Yes,
the fact
as
that,
she should be.
She gave props to so many Black female artists of the past 50, 100 years. And I love she gave even shout out to her favorite Destiny's Child, Kelly and Michelle. And just being able to include that ballroom, taking what all the white people in 1990 thought it was ballroom, which was Vogue, making that, and it did it so much better. I was so excited when it came out. I think it was the first music I bought in a long time because I just have Spotify Premium, and I have YouTube Premium, so I don't pay for shit anymore. But when it came to Renaissance, it was actually my friend Kevin who was like, "Listen to this," and I go, "Okay," and so I put it on, and I go, the fuck is this? Mm-hmm. The fuck is this? First of all, let's get, like you mentioned Summer Renaissance. Can we just talk about how she brought in Donna Summer into that? Not only was she, I think she was in the Queen's remix mentioned, but she has her own goddamn song. Mm-hmm. And the bringing in Donna Summer, who I feel like, is, she is the queen of disco. She's got a whole street named after her in Boston now, but I think that she really did a lot of things that set the stage for people like Beyonce and a lot of the other artists it doesn't matter what genre, because she just, she did so many things within her repertoire. She was mixing, disco, but she also did rock. She also did pop. So it's like, it was Beyonce doing a little love letter to that. And I mean, how many people did we hear all yell unique? And it's like, it wasn't unique anymore when you said it. But when you did their Alien Superstar, when Beyonce did it, I mean, come on. When we were talking about this particular album, number one, I was like, I think everyone's going to put it on their list. So I think everyone's going to have a lot to say about it. But I just, I'm so glad that, Gary, you said it and talked about everything. I want to give a shout out to Big Frida.
Yes.
I had the pleasure of working with her last year at an event, and she deserves everything that she gets. So I hope Alien Superstar, I hope the album gets all of the accolades, all of the awards this year. It is my number one. That's who I'm rooting for. So I will stop now.
Andrea, you had not heard the album until we started talking about our picks, right?
I live under a rock and I still have not listened to the album.
That's okay.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. No,
I have a little bit of a strained relationship with Beyonce. Let me act like I'm like personal friends with Beyonce. Like I have a strained relationship. No, I'm not like a mega fan of Beyonce in the same way that I'm not like a mega fan of Taylor Swift. Like they are artists that I recognize are talented and are great, and they have their problems, and they have a huge fan base that will tear me apart if I say anything negative about them.
Yes.
But I will eventually get around to listening to it, just like with Taylor Swift stuff. I will say I could stare at the album cover for Renaissance all day long. I do want that like blown up and like hung in my apartment somewhere.
Yeah, that's how I'm entering for my 50th birthday. Just like that. So no, great job, Gary. Thank you so much. And Jonny, do you want to take us home with the final pick of the night?
All right, I'm gonna switch in directions a little bit. So my final pick of the year is Red for Filth by Alaska Thunderfuck 5000. If you don't know who she is, she was a contestant on RuPaul's Drag Race Season 5 and the winner of the All Stars 2 franchise. This is her 4th album. So first of all, including a Drag Race album, alum album, is quoting another Drag Race alum, choices. I mean,
it's bold.
It's bold, but
yeah.
I'm not going to call anyone in particular because it's not, that's not what the point of this podcast is. But sometimes the quality, talent, musicality of some other of the alums, it can leave a little bit to be desired. Well, first of all, like Alaska had, first of all, she helped bring back the bitch track in 2014, 2015 in her album Anus. I mean, although you still kind of had to know the show. So, I mean, I enjoyed it, but it's like, oh, it's still kind of kickity ka. It's, you still have to kind of know Sashay Away and all that other shit. Although there wasn't that broader appeal. I think Red for Filth actually helps to bring forth that ability to not have all of those prerequisites. This really is a love letter to the pop music scene of the 90s and early 2000s. That's really all you need to know to enjoy this album. And that she proves that she's more than just hi or just drolling out her accent. It wasn't that. It was, I initially thought that that's what it was going to be. And I was like, oh, okay, I love Alaska. She's great. But it's not just bitch tracks. It's not just house music. She delves into pop, house. She does ballads. She goes into even alternative music. She does give a little something for the Drag Race crowds. Throw in some girls from previous seasons. T.S. Madison, who was also on the Renaissance album. I forgot to mention that too. That's why it's going to win Best Album of the Year. But it's like you really don't need that. I mean, I think looking at some tracks, they're talking about a love letter to the 90s. All that she wants, she does a reboot cover of the Ace of Base track from 1993. If you enjoyed Swedish pop and if you enjoyed Swedish goth metal, this is the song for you. It has harder beat, it's darker arrangements, it has something more than just doing a karaoke version of it. She does a song called XOXO Y2K, which I think is the We Didn't Start the Fire for 90s pop. They talk about flip phones, low rise, cowabunga, ecstasy, keep it in your Jinko jeans. I mean, that for me says it all. Her initial song Red, which was the, I guess, quasi the title track. It's a standalone pop song. It has some of the feel of the 90s, but it doesn't feel like it's just kind of going through the motions of we're just doing a track. It could stand alone right along with anything else currently. The two biggest surprises I had was her song Wow, which is very rockin', which has almost sounds like it was Dishwalla or Sum 41. It could have been on a Now That's What I Call Music in like 2002. You can hear that it's not just singing nasally. She's belting. It's something I've never heard from her. I never necessarily expected that she could do. The video for she's not even in drag. She's just dressed like some guy who I probably made out with in 1999. And that's, again, shows how old I am. But I didn't include this initially until I saw her live. I was fortunate enough to go see her and do a meet and greet, but that's not the reason I put it on there. It became a frantic erotic jukebox musical for this album. I was so impressed. I was bowled over because I just did not think that someone from that franchise of a show, which I absolutely love, could do something that was that standout and that can live on its own. I don't think people who are outside of the Drag Race world would even know what it is. So that's kind of why I wanted to put it on here, because I want people to take a listen to it, because it's much more than just anus thing as possible. So check it out. I loved it. I still listen to it. Red was my number one song this year. So please check it. If you haven't done it, it's worth a listen.
Red is a terrific pop song. It is super catchy. Like, you don't need to know anything. You don't even need to know that the singer is a drag queen. I mean, lest we forget, RuPaul's Supermodel of the World, this was a drag queen who had a massive pop smash that you didn't need to know anything about drag or anything. You just needed to know it was fierce. Red isn't the same type of a song. It's not like a pose and flaunt. It's a kind of a sweet little love song. But yeah, I think it's a really solid album. And I saw Alaska live. God, it was right when I moved to Boston, 2014, I'm going to say, at the Battle of the Seasons. And this was when she was doing Your Makeup is Terrible, which is also, sidebar, a fucking amazing song. But
I was there.
Were you there?
I was there.
I'm sure you were. And she came out on that stage, and she just has a star quality to her live that is like an actual recording artist. It is beyond just a drag queen. And I'm not taking anything away from drag queens. I'm really not. God knows I love them. But she has a power to her. And I'm glad to see her being like, listen, Drag Race has been very good for her. It's been a terrific incubator. She's made a lot of money off of it. But this, I do feel, is a very concerted effort from her to be like, I'm going to push it mainstream now, and I'm going to see how far I can take it outside of this thing that has made me famous already, but what's the next stage that I can go to? And I think Red is a very solid launching pad for her. Does anybody else listen to it? No?
No,
go ahead.
I'm not a huge fan of drag queen music, so this one wasn't even on my radar. But if it's an homage to the 90s and there's as much like genre bending as you say there is, it's definitely one that I'll have to check out.
Gary?
No, Jonny, I love your explanation of like, it's not the typical contestants making an album and it's just crap. Like, I actually like that. And I think that like your explanation just made me more intrigued and want to see like, and help her be as successful as possible by just streaming it and stuff. I'm good job, Alaska. I actually do love Alaska, and she's so talented. So I'm excited to see they listen to this album.
We literally stan an icon. So thank you. That is it, folks. Those are our top albums for the year. Did you listen to any of them? Do you have your own opinions? Is there something else that we missed? This episode is just the beginning of the discussion. Let us know your favorites on social media and at greatpopculturedebate.com. A big thank you to all of my panelists. I always discover so many terrific albums from these discussions, so I'm grateful for all of your excellent picks. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you check out Great Pop Culture Debate's other Best of 2022 episodes devoted to TV, books, and film, and all releasing between now and the new year. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Audible, wherever you follow podcasts, and also check us out on social media accounts for all the latest news. And if you haven't yet supported us on Patreon, what are you waiting for? There are so many great perks, and we would love to have you as part of our little pod family. And you better buckle up, because the Great Pop Culture Debate has plenty more for you in store in 2023. Head to greatpopculturedebate.com right now to vote in the polls for the season 7 topics. We're talking best share song, best TV detective, best queer film, and best Disney park ride. I just put up a bunch more 80s cartoon, girl group, film of 1999. That's just the beginning. So there's great polls. We need your votes. Then in January, come back because we'll be releasing our Patreon-sponsored episodes, which include Best Children's Board Game, Best Song of 1985, Best Actress Oscar winner, and Best America's Next Top Model photo shoot. So much fun. We look forward to an amazing 2023. And remember, everyone is entitled to their wrong opinions.